Hello guys, and welcome back to Jaegerists. In today's video, we will be going through the story of Grisha Jaeger. Leave a like on this video and subscribe to our channel if you want to see more content like this. Grisha was born in Liberio in the year 806 on the continent of Marley. One day, he and his sister ran out of the internment zone chasing after an airship and were found out by two public security authorities officers. One of the men punished Grisha, while the other one took Faye away. After the officer finished beating him, he allowed Grisha to continue watching the airship, stating that since Grisha had already trespassed, they might as well continue watching the airship. However, when Grisha returned home, Faye was not there. Her corpse was later found mangled in a river. The Marleyan officers visited the family home and explained that Faye and Grisha were at fault for leaving, and denied any knowledge of her death. As Mrs. Jaeger was filled with tears, Mr. Jaeger smiled and explained that he would re-inform his son of their history. He then explained the history of the Eldians and why their ancestors' actions justify their outcast status in Marleyan society. However, Grisha explained that he believed the Marley men were lying and tried to say they killed his sister, but Mr. Jaeger silenced him and the two fought over their situation as Eldians. Mr. Jaeger tried to convince his son why they needed to be punished, but Grisha expressed his belief that they should not have to pay for the actions their ancestors committed. Grisha continued to live his life being shamed for being an Eldian and eventually became a doctor. The meeting with Grice, a patient, led Grisha to learn about the circumstances of Faye's death. This gave him the motivation to join the Eldian Restorationists. Through his activities and a mole in the Marley legal system named the Owl, Grisha got information about Eldian history and met Dina Fritz, a person of royal descent. A year later, they got married and had a child, which they named Zeke. Later in their lives, Marleyan officials recruited children to take on the power of the 7 Titans their people had stolen from the Eldians so many years ago, so they could go to Paradise Island and take down King Fritz, who had fled there and built walls for his people 80 years ago. The Owl informed the group that Marley's real goal was to steal the founding Titan so they could enhance their military might. Grisha then decided he would send his own son into the program as a mole for them. Over time, Grisha and Dina began coming increasingly distant with Zeke, leaving him at Grisha's parents' house almost every night so that they could attend meetings with the Eldian Restorationists. Whenever he and Zeke had free time, Grisha would spend it quizzing his son on the true history of the Eldian race. In the meantime, Grisha also learned from Grice that Zeke would need to earn higher marks as a warrior candidate if he was to be involved in the plan to recapture the founding Titan, causing Grisha to put even more stress on Zeke to become a warrior. However, after observing Zeke's poor performance during a public training session, Grisha became frustrated with his son, leading to a heated argument with Dina about what to do with him. One night during dinner, Zeke tried to convince Grisha to stop helping the Eldian Restorationists. Grisha was appalled at the idea, reminding Zeke that the only way for Eldians to live in peace was for the Restorationists to overthrow Marley. He was enraged to hear Zeke bring up Faye, angrily telling him that the Restorationists were fighting with the express intent of making sure that no one suffered the same fate as her. At the age of 7, Zeke exposed his parents and all the Restorationists, and they were sentenced to go to Paradise Island as pure Titans. After being turned into the public security authorities, Grisha was subjected to nude torture, as the soldiers attempted to get him to reveal who the Owl was by cutting off his fingers. Once they gave up on obtaining the information, Grisha and the rest of the Restorationists were taken to Paradise Island and sat on their knees before a large wall by the ocean. After kicking Grice off the wall alive, the rest of the Restorationists were turned into Titans with Titan injection, except for the Jaegers and another member. When it was Dina's turn, Grisha pleaded for her life and tried to point out that she was of royal descent and could be of potential use to them, but was silenced by Kruger before any of the soldiers could overhear him, to Grisha's surprise. He watched her transform into a Titan and run after their friend, Grice. Sergeant Major Gross decided not to turn Grisha into a Titan, but to throw him to the other Restorationist after he had been transformed. After adjusting the dose to create a 3 to 4 M class and injecting the other man with injection, revealed to actually be Titan spinal fluid, he threw him off the wall to transform. He began explaining how watching people be devoured made him feel alive in such a dull society. He then began pushing Grisha off, asking him to fight and die in an interesting way. However, before he could do so, Kruger pushed Gross off the wall. As Gross is devoured, Kruger asked Grisha if he enjoyed such a sight. He then revealed that he was the Owl, and claimed that he would show Grisha how to truly use the power of the Titans. Kruger then transformed into a Titan and destroyed the steamboat that took all the soldiers to the island. After destroying the Marleyan men and their equipment, Kruger returned to the top of the wall and, after introducing himself and explaining how he became a spy, he began to speak with Grisha, who asked him why he left only him alive. Kruger fell to his knees from exhaustion and told Grisha of his terrible acts against several thousand Eldians, saying he did it all to serve Eldia in the end. Kruger then said that he was entrusting Grisha with his final mission, and went on to express regret for playing a role in his sister's death, but that the hatred he saw in Grisha's eyes the next day was part of the reason he chose him. This reminded Kruger of his own uprising, when he watched his family be burned alive and chose to get revenge for them. However, it turned out that he had to torture several Eldians to maintain his identity until that day. Kruger told Grisha that he must enter the walls and take back the founding Titan, using the power of the Titans Kruger would give him. Grisha then asked why Kruger was not doing it himself, but Kruger explained that 13 years after inheriting the power of one of the 9 Titans, the host would die, and it had been 13 years for him. He then explained that all Eldians are connected by paths to the founding Titan Ymir Fritz once had, and that no one can ever be stronger than her, so they die after 13 years as she did. Grisha then questioned this logic and the Eldian history, which Kruger explained is probably not true from the Marleyan or Eldian perspective. When Grisha asked Kruger why he let the Marleyans turn Dina, he said that since Dina had royal blood, it was too risky for her to remain. She had to go before Zeke could tell Marley more. When Grisha objected, he asked Grisha if Dina being forced to bear Marley's children for the rest of her miserable life would have been better. Grisha told him that he did not believe he was fit to take on his mission, and that he would not have paid the price for freedom if he knew what it was. Kruger confronted Grisha and told him that the reason he chose him is that, at the expense of others, he sought freedom by going past the walls. He said that their brothers and sisters paid the price for their freedom, and that those actions will follow them until they are repaid, even after death. Grisha then stood up and accepted Kruger's mission. He then told him the name of the Titan he was going to take: the Attack Titan. After taking his power, Grisha went to the walls and began his mission. Grisha was found wandering outside the walls near the Shiganshanan district by Keith Shadis, a soldier of the Survey Corps. The soldier was very surprised to see him, not only because he was outside the walls, but also because he claimed to have suffered amnesia and he had no memories about the civilization inside the walls and the military. Keith brought Grisha back to Shiganshanan, where he was imprisoned for illegally entering Titan territory. While imprisoned, he claimed to remember his name. Upon release, Grisha revealed to Keith that he remembered being a doctor, and asked him for knowledge about the world inside the walls. Keith took Grisha to a pub in Shiganshanan, where Keith taught him about the world. Suitably impressed by the life that the Eldians of the walls had managed to build for themselves, Grisha was surprised to hear that Keith was unhappy with the state of the walls, and had joined the Survey Corps in the hope of seeing the larger world. Praising Keith and the Survey Corps, Grisha caught the attention of a nearby barmaid named Carla, who began to chastise Keith for attempting to recruit more people to the Corps. However, Grisha assured her that even if he was offered the chance, he would not join them, as the Corps required special people to join its ranks. Grisha eventually found work at a hospital. When an epidemic broke out in Shiganshanan, Grisha was able to successfully cure those afflicted, including Carla and her parents. Grisha and Carla eventually married each other. At a party after the wedding ceremony, Grisha began to tell guests about how Keith introduced him to Carla, before realizing that Keith had left the party early. He and Carla would later have a son, Aaron. Grisha used his occupation as a doctor to get close with government officials in order to gather information on the ruler of the walls and continue his mission as a restorationist. He eventually discovered the location of the Reese family's chapel, as well as the hatch leading down to the basement where the succession rituals take place. However, he chose to delay his mission in favor of staying with his new family. Years later, Grisha was making a house call with Aaron tagging along, to Mr. Ackerman and Mikasa's mother for an appointed medical examination in the year 844. When he arrived there, he found them dead for hours. He asked Aaron if he had seen the girl named Mikasa anywhere, but he was too shocked to answer. He then told Aaron to wait for him at the foot of the mountain while he finds the military police. After the MPs and Grisha arrived at the murderer's hideout, Grisha hugged Aaron and scolded him for the murders he committed when saving Mikasa, asking if he even understood what he had done. However, instead of continuing to scold him for killing Mikasa's kidnappers, he tells him that this time he was lucky, and he could have been killed himself. Mikasa, cold and depressed, asked Grisha in what direction her home was, and stated that she was cold and wants to leave. In response, Aaron gave her his scarf, and Grisha told her to come live with them. Despite not going through immediately with his mission, Grisha felt that his family, especially Aaron, deserved to know the truth about life outside the walls. At night, Grisha would go into the Jaeger family basement and write down information about his former life in Marley. After compiling everything into 3 journals, Grisha inscribed a message revealing that humanity was still alive beyond the walls on the back of his old family's photograph, and hid all of his writings in his desk. He then locked the basement door, keeping the key on him at all times. Upon learning from Mikasa that Aaron wants to join the Survey Corps, Grisha is more obliging of the idea than Carla and asks his son why he wants to leave the walls. Aaron's answer, that the deaths of the many soldiers who have already served in the Survey Corps will be a waste if no one continues the fight, galvanizes Grisha to resume his mission to retake the founding Titan from the Reese family. Grisha announces that he will be departing, telling a bewildered Carla that there is no point in trying to stop an inquisitive mind like Aaron's. Before he leaves, he promises to show Aaron what he has been hiding in their basement when he returns. Grisha reflects on what he must do the entire way to the Reese Chapel, seeing through the future memories of the attack Titan that the day had come when Ball Maria would fall. Bursting in on the royal family, Grisha reveals himself to be an Eldian from beyond the walls and begs Frida Reese to use her founding Titan ability to save Shiganshina from the Titans that are breaking in. However, succumbing to the will of Karl Fritz, she refuses to act. Grisha argues that the Eldians within the walls should not be killed for crimes their ancestors committed which they are not even aware of, but his protests fall on deaf ears. Frida attempts to explain to him that there is no point in stealing the founding Titan's power, as only the royal family can use it. But Grisha reveals that he is already aware of this fact. The Attack Titan's inheritors have the ability to see the memories of the Titan's future inheritors, giving them the ability to see the future. Grisha proclaims that since the royal family is bound by Karl Fritz's vow, he will steal the founding Titan away from them. However, despite his threats, Grisha is unable to bring himself to kill the entire Reese family, horrified at the thought of killing children. It is only when Aaron, acting through the timeless paths in the future year 854, demands he fulfill his duty by reminding him of his fellow restorationists and his dead sister Faye, that Grisha finally transforms. Grisha easily beats Frida in combat and devours her before going on to slaughter the entire Reese family, sparing only Rod Reese on Aaron's orders. Exiting the chapel, Grisha is left horrified by his actions. On the verge of hysteria, Grisha demands Aaron to tell him if this is what he wanted. He begins asking aloud why Aaron did not show him everything that will come to pass and, due to them living next to the wall, hopes that Carla is safe and was able to get away. He asks himself again if this was the only way, before realizing that Zeke's future self is also visiting him through the paths. Grisha tells his eldest son that only Aaron's plan will succeed, but laments that Aaron's plan will lead to ghastly events. Looking up, he realizes that he can actually see the future Zeke and embraces him, apologizing for being such a horrible father and begging for him to find a way to stop Aaron's plan. Traveling to Trost District, Grisha locates Keith Shadis and enlists his help in searching for his family among the refugees. Upon finding Aaron, the two men learn that Carla has been devoured by a Titan. Grisha is devastated and, thinking back to his interaction with Aaron at the Reese Chapel, realizes why he did not reveal what happened. Accepting that his successor is indeed Aaron, Grisha merely tells him that he must avenge his mother and takes Aaron into the woods. When Keith tries to stop him, arguing that Grisha should not put such a burden on the boy's shoulders as he might not be gifted like Grisha Grisha simply explains that the fact that Eren is his son makes him qualified, and orders Keith not to get involved. In the forest, he entrusts Eren with the key to his basement and injects him with a Titan serum, explaining to Eren that their memories will teach him how to use the ability. Grisha is immediately devoured by Eren, transferring both the Founding Titan and Attack Titan to him. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. It really means a lot to us. We will see you guys very soon in one of our next videos.